Auzubillah min shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, and a very warm welcome to you all to our very first online AMSA Freshers Week. Now, with schools and universities starting in the coming weeks, inshallah, we thought it would be a good idea and an ideal opportunity to organise an AMSA Freshers Week. Although we had students in mind for this event, we of course do welcome all Qadam and guests. And the AMSA team has planned what I pray to be an enjoyable and beneficial event for all, inshallah. As a further introduction to myself, my name is Luqman Bajwa, and I have the honour of serving as Mutmi Murabbi, which is a department that looks after student affairs within MK UK. My background is I studied mathematics for my undergraduate degree at the University of Cambridge, and for the last 13 or 14 years, I've been working as a derivatives trader in investment banking. Now, one of the reasons why I'm sharing my professional background is because I think one of the great strengths within MK is that we have an opportunity to network with our peers. And I've always found that Khaddam have always been willing to help their fellow Khaddam and Atfal when it comes into insight into their careers or university degrees. And yet I've always felt that, Khaddam and Atfal, we can sometimes be a little bit shy to ask, our fellow Khaddam what they are studying and what they do for a living. So I do encourage you all to ask these questions. And some of you will be surprised by the wide variety of interesting subjects other Khaddam are studying or have studied, or the interesting careers that they might be pursuing. And sometimes you'll find that these people are very close to your home and sometimes even within your Inqiyad. As an introduction to the Department of Amur Tulba, like I said, we cater to the needs of the students within the Majlis, whether that be for academic or professional career advice or otherwise as well. So for example, one of the things we've always helped with is we help with things like university applications, helping students decide what university course that they might want to take, or helping students with applying for medicine or applying for Oxbridge or any other universities. Or we might be helping graduates decide what to do next after universities. But even beyond just academic or career advice, we're always there to help in any shape or form. And ultimately, that's what we are. We are a support network. So for those of you who don't have my number already, I will share my contact details in the Zoom chat. So feel free to call me or email me at any time. Now, obviously, with the current pandemic crisis, one of my main concerns is the impact this crisis has had on the students and on their education. And I've read so many reports from experts who have shared this very concern that this crisis will impact specifically those students who tend to come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And looking at the social, economic and demographic background that makes up much of our Majlis, I think there's a significant number of us who fall into this category that historically in our group we don't perform as well as the national average, and this crisis has the potential to make it worse. Now there might be loads of different reasons why this might be the case. It might be complex socio-economical reasons, it might be cultural reasons, or there might be other biases in play within the system. But regardless of what these issues are, the one thing I've been keen to stress to as many students as possible is that we can counter all these issues and more by adopting the Islamic values that are taught to us by Huzur Aqdas, may Allah be his helper. As recently as last December, AMRA, which is the Ahmadiyya Muslim Research Association, which is an organisation within MK UK, they hosted a historical international conference in which beloved Huzur Aqdas, may Allah be his helper, delivered what I would describe as a truly phenomenal speech. In that speech, he challenged all students and researchers, and I'm keen to stress he was addressing students in the speech as well. He challenged us to retake the mantle of being the world leaders in sciences and humanities, like the Muslims have done, like the Muslims did many centuries ago. And he challenged us to carry on their legacy and the legacy that's left behind by Dr. Abdul Salam. And he gave us the blueprint on how to do this as well. He gave us a phenomenal commentary of a verse from Surah Imran, where he explained beautifully how, as students, we need to adopt the Quranic principles of remembering Allah while standing, sitting, and lying on our sides, and ponder over the creation of the heavens and the earth. He instructed us that when we approach our studies, we need to apply this very principle and actively seek out proofs of the oneness of Allah in whatever field we study, whether it's the physical sciences or the humanities. He reminded us everything has been created by Allah Ta'ala for the benefit of mankind. And if we remember this and constantly ponder over this before, whilst and after we pursue our studies, then when we bow down to Allah, He will bestow enlightenment in ways we couldn't possibly imagine. Now this is a phenomenal promise and no ordinary promise, but it's one we have to take very seriously. And I think we have to remember these instructions are not limited to just a few individuals, but to all of us, all students, all professionals, whatever we're doing. and we have to seriously change the way we approach our studies or our work. So my humble advice and request to you all is that you reread the speech or listen to it again. We're going to post links to the written speech and the video in the Zoom chat for your benefit. I humbly urge you all to take notes from this speech and even print out your favourite quotes and pin them in your bedrooms or your place of study. And very seriously take on this challenge that beloved Huzur has given us in this speech. I'd also like to take this opportunity to urge you all to take benefit from this Freshers Week that AMSA UK has organised for you. The reason we have focused on the topics we have chosen is because these are some of the topics that beloved Huzur Aqdas, may Allah be his helper, has urged us to focus on. So I pray that this Freshers Week in some small way can help you prepare for this coming year. And always remember that as Ahmadi Muslims, Huzur has always reminded us to study religion in parallel to our secular studies. And with that, I don't want to delay our first speaker any longer, as I'm sure you're all excited to hear from him. So I'd like to pass it back to Yusuf Saab. Jazakumullah. Yusuf Saab, are you there? I think you're on mute.
My apologies, I was on mute there. So we have some people watching on Instagram Live as well. We've had a few technical difficulties for those of you watching on Instagram Live, which we're working to fix. But for those on the Zoom call, we're very fortunate to have Qamar Zafar Sahib with us at the moment, who is serving as Movin Sadr for MTA UK and is also serving in the MTA social media department. Qamar Sahib has very kindly agreed to talk on the topic of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu, our perfect guide. And I would now like to bring in Qamar Zafar Sahib to begin the talk. And just before you come in, Qamar Zafar Sahib, I will also just add you to this, to the Instagram Live, so so the viewers there can watch as well. So we're both on Instagram and Zoom. So I'll hand over to Qamar Zafar Sahib. Jazakallah.
I have no idea how well this Instagram live will work, but let's just hope it does. So as has been said, the topic today, which I will try to speak up about, is the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who is our perfect guide. And Qamar Sahib went ahead and he gave a really amazing introduction about himself and everything that he's done. All I can say is I just about passed my GCSEs, so you can already guess what I'm about to tell you. But alhamdulillah, beyond that, I did have the opportunity to actually study in Jamia Ahmadiyya UK for 7 years. And of course, you know, the most important thing about that is the greatest thing that it does offer is direct guidance and spiritual guidance and almost a fatherly figure sort of connection with Hazrat Khalifatul Masih ayyadahullahu bin Nasrihil Aziz. So we do learn and get the opportunity to learn a lot in that way. So today, obviously this is an AMSA talk. So when I was given the topic of the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, I was thinking how is he going to be our guide? I was thinking, obviously, we need to talk about this from the perspective of students and how best it can benefit students. Maybe it will be something beneficial for others as well. So I'm going to try and talk probably for about 15 to 20 minutes. We're only going to go through 4 points, break them down and try to understand what these 4 points are, how the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam promoted those 4 points, and what we can do to actually learn from those. And I'm actually going to start off because when I was thinking, like I said, all I did before joining Jamia was actually just my GCSEs. And actually, they recently just changed the criteria, right? Now you guys get graded with like numbers and stuff. But I'm saying it like I'm really old, but in that time, we obviously were graded by letters. And I did fairly well in my GCSEs. I could say I got a couple of A stars, a couple of A's, some B's. But there was one subject which particularly was a nuisance to me. And that, ironically speaking now, was actually photography and video editing. And I really didn't like that topic one bit. And to be honest with you, because I knew I was going to, inshallah, join Jamia, I thought to myself, well, what's the point of putting in the effort of going to, you know, doing all this 90% coursework and a 10-hour exam on photography and video editing, which probably won't be that beneficial for me in my future. And how wrong was I? Because now, ironically, I'm actually being posted in MTA online, social media department, which is literally my day job, is basically just editing things day in, day out. So that is something which, when I look back at now, I think of that as a very funny thing, but it leads us to our very first point. And that is actually that don't take education for granted. Everything that we have around us, we are so lucky to have that. And thinking back now, if I had been in that moment and I had actually taken that course seriously, I probably would have learned a lot more than what I know now. So that's actually really amazing. And this is where we begin to our first point, like I said. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how was he a role model for us in this regard? The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually said, number one, that we should even seek knowledge if we have to even go to China. And that's actually, of course, in those times was a very difficult endeavor to do. Nowadays, obviously, is not that difficult. But what it basically means is that the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to us that knowledge is so important that even if you have to go out of your way to acquire it, we should actually try and do that. And it doesn't mean that it's just some specific knowledge that the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was talking about. Some of us might assume that he might have just been talking about religion or something spiritual. But in fact, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam even said that a lost word of wisdom, any sort of wisdom, it could be any sort of knowledge, that is the lost property of a believer. So anything that we find where we can learn something, anything that we can find that we think might increase our knowledge, whether or not we think it's actually crucial for our current situation in life, we should try to gain that and try and attain that information. And that's really, really important to know. And Hazrat Ibn Masud radiallahu anhu, who was a companion of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has actually said that the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam went even beyond this. And he said that in life, there's actually only two people, count that, only two people who you should envy. Now, who are those two people? The first person is that person who's been given wealth, a fair amount of wealth, and he's been enabled to actually spend that wealth in the way of God Almighty, and he's able to give charity, he's able to help other people. That's absolutely amazing. The second person that you should envy, someone that you should really look up to and you know, be someone or aspire to be, is that person whom God gave wisdom and knowledge, and then he used that wisdom and knowledge to teach other people. That is the two types of people that the Holy Prophet Muhammad said that are enviable. So people who we should really, really look up to. So this is the teaching of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Point number one, that we shouldn't take education for granted, and everything that we have around us is something, if we attain that, then we can become somebody who other people would inshallah look up to as well. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam put so much emphasis on education. You can imagine that in nowadays, you know, if you commit a crime, then there's obviously punishments for that. You can go to prison, you can have a fine, and there are many other punishments like this. In the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were many crimes for which the punishment wasn't imprisonment, it wasn't a fine, it wasn't anything to do with physical punishment. It was simply to teach other people how to read and write. That is how important education was to the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we can see that actually follows down into the Ahmadiyya Muslim community as well, because when Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu anhu, who was the second Khalifa of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, you might know, you might not know, when the Jamaat moved to Rabwa from Qadian, it was a very difficult time at that time. The Jamaat had just acquired this land, and the clerics, people who were against the Jamaat, were actually mocking the Jamaat, saying that you people have actually acquired a land which is completely barren. It has no water. There's no opportunity for there to be any sort of agriculture growing there. But that's what the concerns were at that time. Now, at that time, Hazrat Muslim Maud, of course, had to worry about a lot of things. He could have said, you know, at that time that these are our priorities. Let's focus on this right now. But he didn't just stop there. Even though the Jamaat was facing challenges of these sorts at that time, even then he did say that right now, at this very moment, it's my aspiration that 90% of the people living here in Rabwa, they should learn to read and write. Imagine this, there's so many other crises going on. People don't have homes, they don't have their food. And of course, the Jamaat is working towards fixing that. You can see that nowadays, of course, even in Rabwa now, you can see how beautiful it is. But at the same time, regardless of what was happening, he still put emphasis on education. And we can see that that is really, really, really important. So that's where we understand that we first of all have to realize that education, we shouldn't take it for granted. And if you're sitting your GCSEs, I forgot to tell you, you actually got a really bad grade in my photography. And back in the days, they used to grade you an F. I got even worse than that. It's called a U, because I actually didn't bother. And that was my bad. I should have actually benefited from that, and actually could have helped me and also helped me to create better content for the platforms that we see on the Jamaat today. So we should never ever take anything or any opportunity for granted. And it comes to obviously the last point in this point is that the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually said, and this is really, really important and interesting as well, that it only takes one person of religious knowledge, one person, to stand against 1,000 armies of shaitan. That's all it takes, one person. This is something that we should never forget. If we have the right knowledge and we have the right inspiration and we are praying for that, then you are enough as a person to silence all of those individuals who are out there to create harm in the opposite manner. this is something that the Holy Prophet Muhammad has said. So this knowledge that we are out to acquire, it really can make a change. And how can it make a change? Luqman Sahib in the beginning briefly quoted His Holiness Hazrat Amir al-Mu'mineen Ayyadahu Allah bi Nasrihi al-Aziz in the AMRA conference, which happened just recently actually. And Hazur actually said something which I was there as well, actually really woke me up. And he said that in the time of the third Khalifa of the Ahmadi Muslim community, Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad, may Allah have mercy on him, when this whole institution was established of research and studying in the Jamaat, the vision of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis was that people who are studying in the Jamaat should exemplify and try and personify people like Abdul Salam Sahib. They should go to that level, and they should be people who are renowned and recognized for their profession in the entire world. And not only that, but he wished that hundreds of people shall be born and shall be prominent like him. And Hazur carried on to say that in his time, this wasn't fulfilled. This desire that he had in that time, there weren't many people who actually stepped up to that task. And of course, that was for us as Khudam al-Ahmadiyya at that time, was a very painful thing to hear. And Hazur carried on to say that, in fact, we are now in the present time, in this day and age, in my day and age, and even now, I can't even say that even 10 people have stepped up to this task. And that was, for us at the time, such an awakening statement that what is being expected of us and what are we actually delivering. So we need to realize that on one hand, we have the knowledge, we have the opportunities. In the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, they had to go to extremes to gain that knowledge. We can see even later, even 200 years later, when Imam Bukhari, may Allah have mercy on him, had to collate the ahadith and the narrations. He had to travel so far and wide, and he had to have such a strict set of rules so that that knowledge could be collated. But for us, it's so easy now. All we have to do is search online. We can quickly go to the library and attain information that way. There's nothing stopping us except for ourselves. All of these things are there for us. And that leads me to our second point. There's nothing stopping us except for one thing. And that is our commitment and our level of sacrifice. And this is what the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he taught us as well. That if you have sacrifice, if you have the capacity to sacrifice inside you, if you have the capacity to be committed inside you, then you can be that person who will become to that level of Abdul Salam Sahib and many others like that. We can see that the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we all know the Battle of Badr. We all know that there were only 313 companions. But they were companions, they weren't soldiers. We should not forget that as well. They didn't have armor, they didn't have the right arms, they didn't have anything like that. But the enemy, they had everything. They had 1,000 strong, not people, they had 1,000 strong soldiers. People who were skilled in the arms of fighting. People who were ready, equipped to fight. Now, people who were on the side of the Muslims, these 313 brave companions, which even His Holiness is speaking about in the Friday sermons currently, they could have weighed the odds. They could have clearly realized that they were outnumbered. And they probably knew at that time that it was going to be a difficult battle and that the chances were tough. Yet they were prepared for sacrifice. They left their homes knowing that they probably wouldn't come back. Well, not their homes rather, but when that situation arose, when they were in that situation and decided to go towards the Meccans, they knew that this could be it. To the point that the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself, before the battle even began, you would imagine that a general, like he was, would be, adjusting the ranks and, giving the people a prep speech. This is how we're going to defend ourselves. The Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he was in his tent and he was lying prostrate before God Almighty, praying to God Almighty, saying that if we are destroyed today, then there will be nobody who will worship you after us. And this is the level where even the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam knew that if it wasn't for God's mercy, if it wasn't God who was going to accept this prayer, there was no chance. There was no chance that this could be a victory. So he was there and using that prayer there, but they all knew that this was going to be a sacrifice. You can see, just count 10 years from that moment, 313 to 1,000. Count 10 years from that moment, they were marching 10,000 strong back into Mecca, victorious. And this was their level of sacrifice. They went from outnumbered, completely no chance, to domination, to absolute domination, in a way where people who were their fiercest enemies saw the peace and they saw the beautiful teachings of Islam, and they had no choice but to accept Islam. And the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he returned to Mecca, he didn't have a single sword in his hand. He didn't have any sort of weapon. So we can see that their level of sacrifice, their commitment what did it bring? Not only did it bring the success of Islam, but it brought about a sort of victory which required no sword, which required no violence, no rebellion. And that was absolutely perfect. So this is what we need to realize. This was the example of the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And we're very lucky, actually. We're extremely lucky, because the time we live in, this is a golden era. A couple of years ago, Huzur Aqdas Ayyadullah bin Sayyid al-Aziz, in his Friday sermon, said that there will be a time that will come, and this is mentioned by actually the Prophet Muhammad, where big powers of the world, countries, even the words Rus and America were used, they would collide. There would be battles, and there would be other big political powers which would rise, they would battle, and they will fall. And His Holiness Huzur said that at this time, people will turn towards religion. They will realize that democracy, they will realize that the so-called democracy of right now, which is the proclaimed democracy, and the current situation where we have all these powers, they would have failed them. They would turn towards something else, which would be religion. And that is the time when the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, they will rise to success. That is the time where people will turn towards those people who used to call towards God. And we need to understand that that time is now. That time is coming now. You just look around you. That time is now, where this probably would happen. And His Holiness was bringing our attention towards this. So we need to think about ourselves now. How are we, as Ahmadi young Muslims, going to play a role in this? Right now, if you imagine yourself as a young student, yeah, you probably relate to this anyway. Let's do a quick analogy. You are a student. Obviously, you need to pay your bills. You need to pay for your rent. You're obviously going to look for a part-time job. Now, you go to this shop owner, and he's offering a job to you. Now, this shop owner, he is not offering you that much money. He's overworking you 7 days a week. You don't have that much leeway in how many days you can take off. Yet, because you're there and you have no choice, you take that job. And your owner, who's your employer, he sees that over time, despite the fact that he's not paying you enough, despite the fact that he is working you overtime, you're still being committed. You're still sacrificing. You're still turning up on time, and you're still doing your job. Now, this is your employer. He's a small-time businessman. Now, well, let's say one day this employer of yours, he hits it big. He signs a huge contract with a big broker, and now he's a big service provider to people all across the world. Now, what's happening all of a sudden? He went from a small business to a small company to somebody who's recognized and understood and respected and demanded from the entire globe. This means here he probably commands a lot of money as well. Automatically, this would mean that a lot of people will want to work for this person. There will be a lot of people who are skilled. There will be a lot of people who are professional that will want to become employees of this person. And this person can easily afford them. Yet, he has an option. Who will he keep as his right-hand man? Who will he choose to be that person who is right there fighting beside him? Would it be those people who are professional, who know what they're doing, but yet they're only coming for the money? Or would it be those people who were there since day one, who were overworked, who were those people who weren't paid enough, but yet they stayed committed and they stayed loyal? Of course, he would choose that person, despite the fact that he might not have been the most capable among them. And that is exactly how the Jamaat is right now. Of course, we are progressing day by day. Alhamdulillah, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community progresses day by day. But what we need to realize at the moment, on the global scale, there is a lot more progress that we need to do. And at the moment, the Khuddam that are serving their time to the Jamaat right now, the Khuddam that are Bakfina, the Khuddam that are dedicating their time, their education, their lives, their careers to the service of Jamaat, they're literally like this person who is working for this employer. At the moment, people, these Khuddam, these people are putting in their time. They're not getting paid anything for it. They don't get paid for their work animals. They work way more time than what is expected of them. They do long hours for the service of the Jamaat. Yet when the time comes, when Ahmadiyyat, inshallah, will become so successful that it will be recognized, respected, and demanded by the entire world, there will be lots of people, lots of very, very prominent, important, respected people, and this is what Hazur spoke about in that sermon, who would want to come and offer their services to Jamaat. Who are the prime ministers and who are the politicians? They would want to come and work for the Jamaat and be there and offer their services. They are the professionals. They are the best of the best. Yet who will be those people who, inshallah, will be offered those positions which are respected, those positions where you need someone who you can trust? Of course, it will be those people who were there since day one. Those people who offered their services. They went, they studied, they competed, and they offered that education of theirs. They offered those careers of theirs, not to money, but they offered it to the Jamaat. Those will be the people who had that opportunity. So those people who are going to have this opportunity are basically all of you. This is that time right now. You have the opportunity right now to study hard. You have the opportunity right now to endeavor and then sacrifice all of that for the sake of the Jamaat. But you will be the ones who will reap the blessings more than anybody else. There are many people before us. I'm not talking about a couple of years before us, centuries before us, who have done way more than what we could have ever imagined. They studied hard, they prayed, they went on massive journeys. Yet the Prophet ﷺ was not raised in their time. So they didn't have the opportunity that one we have. And we, on the other hand, who have probably a lot easier resources on our table, we can do a lot, we can probably achieve half of what they did in half of the effort because we have everything here. We are those people who have been given the opportunity. How lucky are we? But equally, how unlucky would we be if we didn't take part or avail of this opportunity? So that's point number 2, sacrifice. Make sure that you know this is the opportunity where we need to give it everything. Third point, before this is a penultimate point, is of course, as students, we of course are studying in universities, we're studying in colleges, and there can become times where you might be in a situation which is quite heated. You might become in a situation where you don't realize it, but other people will be watching you. And this is where we need to understand that our character, the way we approach people, our attitude is actually a form of silent tabligh. Or if we're negative, it can actually be a way of pushing people away from Ahmadiyyah. So this is really important because we should see that the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, again, who was an example in this, the incident of Taif is very well known. The Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ went to the people of Taif to preach Islam to them with the message of peace. And how did they respond to that? Of course, they threw stones at him. Not even the men, the young kids thought it was their job to go and chase the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ out of the town by pelting stones. And they, of course, did that with an intention of very seriously harming the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Now, the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, of course, left Taif, and he was, of course, at that time in a very difficult situation. And Allah Almighty said to the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, if you wish, I could actually demolish these people. I could finish these people for what they have done to you. And of course, Allah Almighty already knew what the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would reply to this. But yet he wanted this to be recorded in history. He wanted his reply to be recorded in history so people know what he said. And the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, despite being violently attacked by these people, said, "Oh Lord, forgive them. They don't know what they've done. Oh Lord, forgive them." And this didn't stop there. The Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, his daughter was killed by an individual. His uncle was killed by another individual. On the day where he became the governor of Makkah and he became that powerful leader, he had the chance to punish them. He forgave both of them. And this is where, without even preaching what the message of Islam is, without even saying what the Quran says, just through his forgiveness, he showed all the people around him what Islam is. But it was very difficult to do. And we need to remember that when we see this example in our time and day, where we are in a heated situation, where even if somebody has done something wrong to us in school or uni or college, and we're feeling angry, we should learn to try and forgive that person. We should learn to try and be the humble one. The Prophet ﷺ has actually said, it's actually an Urdu statement, that live life as though you are the one who is the wrong one. So even though you might be on the right side, even though you might be the one who said the right thing, you should be so humble that you should always be able to accept where you see forgiveness. You should be able to forgive people even though you are not in the wrong. So that is very, very important. We can see one companion of the Prophet ﷺ, Hazrat Munshi Murabbi Qamar Zafar Sahib, a very devout companion, very, very extremely devout companion. He accepted Jamaat just by looking at the face of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, I don't know what people say. I don't know what their arguments are. I just looked at his face, that merciful face of his, that forgiving, kind face of his. That can't be the face of a liar. That's it. That's all it took for him. So we shouldn't underestimate our character, our attitudes, how much of an effect that can actually have on the people who are looking at us. That's the third point. So we've gone through 3 points. The first one was that we shouldn't take our education for granted. The second point was that we should sacrifice everything that we have for the sake of Islam in this golden age. The third one was kindness and humility is a form of silent tabligh. And the final one, most importantly, is prayer. Now, in the colleges, universities, it's very difficult sometimes to find time to pray. I think there's 2 reasons probably why people might find it difficult. Number one is just time constraint or location. They will have those difficulties. And for some people where they live in a demographic where there are other Muslims in that university, they have the other issue of, well, what if we end up in a situation where we have to pray with them? So these are problems which obviously occur. Now, again, the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is a perfect example for this, where once the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, we know how much the Muslims were persecuted in Makkah. And for someone to know that, and to know that people are being killed for being Muslim, but despite that, still go outside into the open city center or the town center of Mecca and just pray there in front of everybody. It takes courage, it takes commitment. And that's exactly what the Holy Prophet Muhammad did. And when he did that, there were actually some mischievous people who used to place things on his back while he was in prostration, even organs of various animals. That was so heavy that he was even finding it difficult to get back off from prostration. That is the challenges that the Holy Prophet Muhammad he went through. Yet he didn't stop praying in those areas. He didn't stop from worshipping Allah Almighty, offering his 5 daily prayers and beyond. So that is exactly what he went through. Kind of when you look at it like that, the problems that we kind of go through aren't really as that difficult. Yet we do find time to make excuses. So we should realize that we can, and where there's a will, there's definitely a way. But yes, we do understand that you do find difficult situations, especially with the second problem, where we would see that there are other Muslims who will probably accuse us, why don't you pray with us? Well, whereas we know that we cannot pray with them, the ultimate and simple answer to understand is that among the articles of faith, where we believe that we are Muslim, we have to believe in many different things. Allah, the book, the day of judgment. And among them, the one thing which a Muslim has to believe in to be a believer, to be a mu'min, is the prophets. Without that, their iman is not complete. And this is something which the Holy Prophet Muhammad has said. And this is precisely why, it's so simple, this is precisely why a Muslim would never pray behind a Christian, or a Muslim would never pray behind a Jew, or a Muslim would not pray behind a Buddhist. Why? Not because they don't like them, but because they haven't accepted the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's simply the only reason, that they haven't accepted what he brought and what he taught. And for a Muslim, a normal Muslim who's non-Ahmadi, for them to pray behind somebody, it's an absolute requirement that they believe in all the prophets. And for Muslims, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is among them. For Ahmadis, it's exactly the same. We have to pray behind somebody who believes in all of the prophets. It's really as simple as that. That is the complete iman. So just like a Muslim would never pray behind a Christian because he doesn't believe in the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we also cannot pray behind others because they do not believe in another prophet who was the Prophet Messiah alayhi salam. And that is really as simple as that. Once we understand it that way, and they also understand it that way, they will definitely understand that we hold the same sentiment as they do when they do not pray behind other people. And that is really where we should come from, but we should not be apologetic about that. Where we can see the example of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was beaten, who was persecuted in the streets of Mecca for praying. Not only him, but the companions as well. Some of them were murdered. That is, of course, an extreme. But this is how courageous they were. So that's really, really, really important. We can see how important prayer is, because this is the last point, within the last point, that Hazrat Amir al-Mu'mineen Ayyadahu bi Nasrihi al-Aziz was also a student just like us. In fact, he studied agriculture. And he actually narrated an incident where he sat an exam once, and after leaving that exam, he immediately knew that it doesn't matter how they mark this paper, there's no way that he could pass that paper because he simply hadn't filled enough of the paper to actually achieve the passing mark. And His Holiness, of course, resorted to prayer. And he tried day and night to pray to Allah Almighty. And he went very extreme in his prayer. And when the results came, there was an announcement made that the way that the grading was done, it was regraded and was reassessed. And because of this, you have, as Azur was being told, that you have passed. And not only that, but because of this reassessment, other people who should have failed, they've also passed as well. So this is absolutely amazing, that not only through the prayer of Hazur did he himself succeed and pass, but that also helped other people pass and succeed as well. So prayer as a student is absolutely vital, it's absolutely essential. And I'm sure many of you are already witness to that. So I'll end it with that. And I hope all of you are able to remember these 4 points. Simply, we're going to go through them just once again. Number 1, not to take education for granted. Number 2, sacrifice everything that we have for the sake of Islam in this golden age. Number 3, to always show kindness and humility, which is a silent tabligh. And finally, never forget, never underestimate the power of prayer. May Allah enable us to understand all of these points. These are just some of the points, some of the examples of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If we read further, we found countless many more. Jazakallah.
Rabbi Sahib, Jazakallah for that excellent account. We just wanted to ask you, Murabbi Sahib, that you mentioned that this is the golden age for Ahmadiyyat, and golden age for us to do tabligh. And now a lot of tabligh, the way we do tabligh is changing, and that a lot of tabligh is now being done through social media, being done through even MTA, even through YouTube. how should we go about that? It's not the classic, tabligh stall and talking to someone. How do we go about that, and how is that type of tabligh different to, the more traditional forms of tabligh?
Exactly. That's a really, really important question. I've only been in MTA online for, let's say, about just under 2 years. With the department and with the prayers of Hazrat Amir al-Mu'mineen Ayyadahullah bin Nasrihil Aziz and the training, we've actually been able to, by the grace of Allah, be able to bring dozens of people to Islam Ahmadiyyat just online, just through the means of social media platforms like Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, on a one-to-one basis. And this is something which I would like to quickly speak about, actually. But before I do, we should definitely understand that when we do tabligh to people online, while there are many benefits to it, there are also very big risks associated with doing tabligh online. The most important thing, and the actually only thing which I should mention, is that when we do tabligh to people online, it does definitely mean that you will speak to people from all over the world. It doesn't just mean you'll be speaking to people down the road or from your city. So people could be from Asia, they could be from the Middle East, they could be from somewhere in a country where the topic of Ahmadiyyat itself is either taboo, is controversial, or practically it's just illegal to talk about it. So you have to be very, very careful, number one, who you're speaking to, and the information that you're giving to them, you have to be very careful about that as well. For example, God forbid, if there is somebody online who is malicious in their intent, and we are giving, and they are, they could come off as innocent asking, we want to know more about the Jamaat, could you let me know who I can contact in my area? What's the number of my local Amir? What's the address of my local mission house? That is the kind of information where we actually need to be very careful about, because if that gets into the wrong hands, then that is actually very negative. But of course, having said that, we should not shy away from people who are out there to learn more about Islam Ahmadiyyat, even if they seem to be people who are negative towards Islam Ahmadiyyat. I will just give you one example of a young person. I'm actually 26 years old. This person was, at that time, was about 24. So he's probably around about the same age as me. Now this person, he lived somewhere in Asia. And the way we found him, or the way we actually came across him, is by seeing a lot of profanity that he had commented on one of our YouTube videos on MTA Online 1. And he had said a lot of things, and they were basically allegations, accusations, and we decided to respond to some of those accusations. It eventually came to a point where we decided we started talking over WhatsApp. We started talking in person, and extremely, I would say, he was extremely aggressive in the way he approached us, to the point where he had said to us that I actually know a cleric where I live, and he is saying that he has all of the answers to every single thing that you have said to me. So we had spoken for many, many hours, and he was saying it with very much confidence. And he said that he has references to every single thing to negate everything that we had said. And I simply said to him at that time that, look, if that's the case, bring those references. If you are able to prove me wrong, then I'll accept defeat. I will say that you guys are completely fine, completely right. Now this youngster is absolutely energized. He's very excited that finally he's got an Ahmadi under his hands. He's got some Ahmadi Qadianis in his grip. So he runs to his cleric and he says to him, look, I got someone. Let's grab him. The cleric says to him, what do you mean you got someone? He said, look, I was telling you about that guy. I've been watching the videos of the Ahmadiyya Jamaat on their YouTube channel, and he's given these arguments, and you said you had some books to answer this, so let's just do it. The cleric heard this, and he became so infuriated. He said to the youngster, look, there's a sword in the mosque right there, which we hang on top of the building. If you ever watch their videos again, I'm going to use that on you. Now this youngster is absolutely terrified, and meanwhile, I didn't actually know about this at this time, but this is what had happened to him. So because that had happened, he hadn't actually responded to me for about 4 to 5 days. And after that, I asked him again. I said, what happened to all of the references that you had spoken about so bravely? He said, look, the cleric, he's had some issues, so I'm going to go and speak to another one. So he went to speak to another cleric and say to him about this is the situation. And they also chased him out of the mosque. So much so they said, if you ever come back, we will also not deal well with you. It was at that time, at that exact moment, where that youngster, who was extremely vicious in his approach, he was extremely aggressive in his approach, immediately realized that everything that had been said to him about the Jamaat, there was nothing to negate that. There was nothing to prove otherwise. And he, before even messaging me, in his mind, had accepted the Jamaat. Now, I WhatsApp him now probably 6-7 days after this to ask him, what's happening? I haven't heard a single response to you. And that is exactly when he said to me, all of this happened. This is what happened with the first cleric. This is what happened with the second cleric, and this is where I now stand. And of course, we at that time were absolutely amazed, not because of anything that we had done, because we hadn't really done anything. We were amazed that this youngster who still lives with his parents is able to give up his whole life, is able to give up everything, is able to stand for truth, even though he knows that his parents, his family, they will neglect him. Even though he knows that everything that he learned as he grew up, the people that he knew, the friends that he had befriended, they would all turn him away. But yet he didn't even think about that for 1 second. He didn't even complain to me about that. And he said that I'm going to become an Ahmadi from today. And I was just amazed at his commitment and his devotion, to the extent that he did move away from his family and he did start living his own life. And of course, he did get guidance from Hazrat Amir al-Mu'mineen. The blessing of social media is that we were able to directly connect him through letters to Hazrat Amir al-Mu'mineen. Any guidance that he needed, he was able to directly actually attain that. But his commitment was something which I can't forget to this day. So we should never actually ever give up on anybody. We think they're aggressive, we think they're negative. We should try our best and we should pray for them as well. And it doesn't even end there. There was actually another youngster who was similar age, just a little bit younger. Now this youngster really knew his stuff about Islam. He actually studied in a madrasa, which is equivalent to what you might see of Jamia UK. So we actually had a very, very, very lengthy debate over a couple of months. Very, very, I would say he was quite scholarly. And there came a time where, again, he actually accepted the Jamaat based purely on the logic and the arguments that were presented to him. However, he also was so young that he had a few problems, and the problems were various. Obviously, being a youngster, you have to think about your future, who will support you, even small things that we take for granted, like who would want to marry you, for example. Yet he didn't even think twice. And he also had to separate himself completely, and he became an Ahmadi. So the sacrifices these people are making across the world, wherever they are, it's absolutely inspirational. And it goes to show that a little effort from our side, is a huge deal for these people on the other side as well. And they would go beyond and do much more than we could ever have imagined. There are also people who are completely unable to speak about Ahmadiyyat. There are countries where you cannot speak about Ahmadiyyat. There are countries where you could get imprisoned for it, or you could get harmed for that, or where Ahmadiyya Jamaat websites are blocked, or in places where the literature is banned. So how can someone even find out about Ahmadiyya? It's impossible for them. The only real way is to come across somebody on social media. And there are people like that who we've come across. Someone who I know who was a bit older than us, who actually had been studying one single book that he had found about Jamaat. And that's the only book he had for 18 years. That book was Barahin Ahmadiyya. He somehow got a hold of this book. And through a video, he left a comment, and we came across him there. And we came across to speak to him on WhatsApp. And he says to us, look, I've been reading just this one book for 18 years. And that's all I know about the Jamaat. But then one day I came across these random YouTube videos of your Khalifa, who's sitting in children's classes speaking to children. And I immediately became in love with the way that he speaks, with the way how he's so kind to children. And once a time came that he was in his village, and people and his clerics started speaking against Ahmadiyyat. And he stood up and he said, look, I don't know what they believe. I don't really know exactly about them because I'm not really exposed to what they believe. But what I do know is that they are not harmful people. They're very kind people. And from what I've seen and observed, they are not like that through the videos that he had seen. Those people completely shut him down at that moment and completely turned against him. And at that time, he had become quiet. But through the blessings of social media, when he was able to meet our team and speak to us, he felt like he was able to ask us anything without the threat of being exposed. And that was really, really actually amazing. So we can see that he not only he was so old that he actually had a family, and he had to again separate, and he had to bear that burden and sacrifice. And he was actually a very prominent professor in somewhere in a country, and it was very difficult for him to make all of these choices. Yet he did it without even thinking once. And this is the sacrifice of the people that are out there on social media, waiting for someone like you or someone like me just to invite them to Islam Ahmadiyya. And it's really as simple as that. And the most beautiful thing is that we have Khilafat, right? So once we've made that connection, we can directly through letters, we can establish that connection for them to the Khalifatul Masih. They can write letters to Huzur and vice versa, of course, then you can be that person who helps them to achieve that. And if you, of course, need help, and you're someone who obviously you're in touch with someone who's an international Tabligh contact, you can always get the help, and you really should get the advice and help of officers like Tabshir, who are out there to actually delegate this work. and get their professional advice. So you're not alone, and you don't need to be afraid, and you should actually seek advice. But these are the blessings that we have available to us through social media. People like that are going to be, inshallah, becoming Ahmadi like that every single day.
Jazakallah, Murabbi Sahib. That story is extremely inspiring to hear. Murabbi Sahib, one sort of thing that many university students sort of come across when we're doing tabligh at university is that often there can be a sort of a sense of intimidation from, when you're talking to Ghair Ahmadis. Ghair Ahmadis often, they bring out a lot of hadith, a lot of sort of, Quranic verses with, and then, often criticize our, pronunciation on specific Arabic words. And often that can be very intimidating for someone to start tabligh, even if it's just online or discussing something over social media. So what is the best way that we can sort of go about educating ourselves so that, we're at the level where we can have the discussion and, and feel confident enough to have them?
And Yusuf, with your permission, I'm going to have to plug something right here. Basically, we've actually been working on something in MT Online just to cater for this. We actually saw that there was a huge problem with regards to allegations. We see that there are people who want to do it. They have the commitment. But let's say, for instance, that on social media or in person, it doesn't matter. Social media, you have the benefit that you can speak to someone and then they reply, and then you have a bit of time to probably message them later. You can do a bit of your research. In person, obviously, it's a lot more difficult. You have to answer within the moment. So we need to have an app or some sort of content resource for Ahmadi Muslims where a khadim or whoever they are can literally go to this place, and within a minute or two, they can get an answer to the question they're looking for. But not only get the answer, they can get the credible references and sources for that as well. So this is something which we felt in the department that there was a gap for that and it needed to be fulfilled. So inshallah, I really do hope that if not within the next few weeks, in the next, especially this year, very, very, very soon, inshallah, the MT Online department, this is a very exclusive thing, I haven't told anybody, will be releasing a content resource which will be not only on social media, not only on YouTube, but also inshallah on a website and an app, an allegations project where we are answering through short social media videos every single allegation to ever exist in a very short manner. But the benefit of that will be that every single video will have the graphics with it, which will cite every single reference to every single point. And not only the references to our arguments, but the references to the arguments that are made by other people as well. So that's really, really important because it will be a very credible source for people to go to find out the correct answer. This is really, really important. Having said that, I would say that on social media, we should stick to social media if you're not experienced. Because like I said, you have time to come back and forth. If you're speaking in person, then that's something that you should probably do after you've had a bit of experience online. Because speaking in person, like I said, it demands you to know the knowledge on the spot. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't stop from doing that. You don't have to go to somebody who's against Islam and do tabligh to them. You don't have to go and pick the person on speaker's corner and pick a fight with him. Who said you have to do that? You can start with your friends. You can start with the people in your vicinity, the people that you know, people that you respect, and the people that respect you. And you should expect from that there can be a respectful conversation. And if you don't know something in that moment, there's nothing wrong with not knowing something. You can always say that, fine, I didn't know that. And inshallah, I'll come back to you. And if not tomorrow, I'll come back to you with that. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's better, it's absolutely better than trying to cover up the not knowing it and coming up with a half-baked answer. That's exactly not what you want to do. So yeah, there's no problem in that. Having said that, you did say that the approach of some of these people is very harsh. It's very aggressive. And where we should be very, very firm in what we say, very, very committed in the way we say it, and we should show them that we believe in that very strongly, we should not stoop to the level of being abusive, aggressive. The Prophet ﷺ actually said that when we deal with our opposition, we should deal with them with kindness and humility. This is really important. So we shouldn't be picking on people. We shouldn't be mocking people. This is a really, really important thing to also keep in mind.
For those people watching on Instagram Live, we're going to be moving on to question and answer sessions, but that will be on the Zoom call. The Zoom link is in our bio. So if you would like to continue benefiting from what the excellent talk Murabbi Sahib is giving, you can just go to our AMSA_UK bio on Instagram, click the link there for Zoom and join the question and answer session on Zoom. So we'll be ending the Instagram Live now, but the talk will continue on Zoom. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum. Okay. Apologies for those people watching on Zoom. We had an Instagram live running simultaneously there as well.
Right.
So we'd now like to open up the floor for question answers to Murabbi Sahib. They can be on any topic that that you would like to discuss. And Murabbi Sahib, Jazakallah once again for that excellent talk. So just to explain how to go about asking a question, there's two options. Either you can use the raise hand function in Zoom and we can unmute you and you can ask your question to Murabbi Sahib, or you can use the chat function. If you send a message to Q&A in the chat, we can then answer your question there. So I will open the floor to questions there. So one question we had come through on Instagram Live was that this is from Daniel Khalon Saab. We put great emphasis on the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, being unlettered. He didn't know how to read and write before the revelation of the Quran. Does this contradict the emphasis we put on education?
It actually, that's something different. Okay, yeah. So it actually further clarifies that, because we can see that the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, what does it mean that he was unlettered? It basically means that in that time, even though the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam at that time he wasn't as educated, or people say that, allege that, then in the time of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he was commissioned and when he was brought towards his task, he didn't hesitate even 1 minute. There was obviously in the beginning when the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was approached by Angel Gabriel. We all know the incident really, really well, that he was in the Ghari Hira, and he was approached by Angel Jibreel, who said to him, and it's mentioned in the Holy Quran as well, in Surah Al-Alaq, that you should recite. And the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, to this he responded that Ma ana biqari'in, that I cannot recite. And it was emphasized to him by Angel Gabriel alayhi salam many a time that you should recite. And of course, to the point where the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that I cannot recite. And he himself was proclaiming that, look, I can't do this. I just don't know how to do this. And then Angel Gabriel commanded him, you will recite. And by the God and command of Allah Almighty, he did recite. So what does that tell us? It tells us only one thing, that at that moment where the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself said that I cannot do this and I'm not going to be able to say this, then how was he able to say this? How was he able to pronounce that? And it goes to show that God Almighty was there to help him do that. And from that day to his demise and to even this day, we can see that every word and everything that he did and every word that was spoken and revealed in the Quran wasn't his own word. It wasn't something that the Holy Prophet Muhammad himself came up with, or he wrote down himself, because that was the whole point that Allah Almighty wanted to prove. That where the Holy Prophet Muhammad himself wasn't able to do this, Allah Almighty put those words into his mouth. He was the one who revealed this divine wisdom. And that is the purpose for why this point was mentioned in the Holy Quran, that the Holy Prophet Muhammad couldn't read, or that it was mentioned in the Hadith that he was unable to read, to further emphasize the fact that everything that he said, that everything that he did was purely the divine command and divine will and word of God Almighty. So that is actually a further miracle which we can see.
That's an excellent point, Murabbi Sahib. So once again, I'll just open it up to the floor to ask a question. If you just go to the participants at the bottom of your Zoom call, click there, and then you can go to more and go and raise hand. We'll be able to come to you with a question. And if you can also then message your questions to Q&A in the chat, and we can take your questions from there. Murabbi Sahib, one more question from that many students have is that we look at the character of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, as a perfect guide for mankind. And one thing that students struggle with a lot is maybe waking up on time. So I was wondering if you can sort of tell us a bit about the and I know this could be a whole talk in itself, but very briefly about the day in the life of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, in terms of what sort of physical things can we pick up.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I would do that, I would just like to say that the question which was posed previously was by my colleague. I'm just pretty sure he was testing my knowledge and nothing else. So I hope I passed that test. Second thing is that, yes, you've asked about this very, very importantly. It's actually really interesting that you mentioned that people struggle to wake up, because the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I don't know if you know, the way that he used to wake up, it's actually narrated. How did he wake up in the morning? And it's physically narrated how did he do that. And it was narrated that as he was laying down, of course, they didn't have alarm clocks or things like that in those days. But of course, after having a habit of waking up early, you do have an internal time clock and your body does wake up. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course, knew as well as being physically challenged as a human that it is difficult to wake up. And sometimes we wake up and we're like, all right, give it 2 minutes, we'll wake up in 2 minutes, and then you don't realize, and it's too late, and you missed your fajr or you missed whatever you wanted to go for. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam understood this weakness, so he knew that the moment you wake up, you really have to wake up. So he used to lay down, and the moment he wake up, he actually physically jumped out of his bed, physically just thrusted himself out of his bed, so that sudden movement would actually awaken his entire body. And this is actually something really interesting to know, because if you were to do that and you were to force yourself into a habit of doing this, it would be very difficult for you to then fall asleep or say 2 more minutes or 1 more minute. So that's really, really important when it comes to sleeping. We can also see that whether it's the example of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Prophet Sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even Hazrat Amir al-Mu'mineen ayyadahullah bi nasrihi al-aziz, that they do something, and it's mentioned in the Quran as well, about people who actually rest during the day. And this is really important for people, especially Muslims who like to offer tahajjud prayer. They like to commit a lot of time to their prayers in the morning. Obviously, you're going to get tired during the day. And it was the example of such people, it's mentioned in the Quran, that they used to rest just for 15 to 20 minutes during the midday. And that is actually backed up by current research as well, that it revitalizes your body. But the key to that is that you should only sleep for 15 to 20 minutes at that period. Any more than that will probably do a negative result on that. In Urdu, it's called kalula. In English, it's called a simple siesta. That's actually a really, really important thing. But further to that, we can see the example of the Prophet Sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who actually, it's mentioned that he used to go for a long walk sometimes to go to Fajr. Not all the time, but when he used to go to Fajr, he used to take many long walks to get there. And that means he would have had to wake up quite early in the morning. And we can also see with Hazrat Hakim Maulvi Nuruddin Sahib, radiallahu anhu, the first Khalifa of the Ahmadi Muslim community, at times he used to walk to pray. He used to take him about 10 to 11 miles. Can you imagine? 10 to 11 miles to walk back and forth to the Fajr prayer. That was their commitment. So they used to actually wake up and have that dedication to go and come back. And we have our cars and we find it difficult to maybe travel 3 miles sometimes. So this was their commitment. It's absolutely amazing. And these are the examples that are beyond, before us. But they did, like I said, they had their ways. Of course they had the commitment, but they did, like I said, have a few examples of how they eased the process for themselves, whether it was through a siesta, whether it was waking up abruptly. There are also examples that we see in the saints of Islam later on, who actually used to drink a lot of water before going to sleep, for instance. So they had no choice but to wake up. These are all of the things which are, of course, they're not part of the faith per se, but they are things which they used to trial and help themselves to wake up on time. I think the most obvious thing is go to sleep on time, but that's probably going to go in one ear and probably go out the other. So, but yeah, that's really important as well.
Jazakallah, Murabbi Sahib. And I think, just from my personal perspective, that point about, jumping out of bed, as the Holy Prophet Sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do, is one that I'll try and implement myself. We've got a few more questions that have come in. If I could first go to Bilal Dar Sahib, who wants to ask a question by video call.
Yes.
If we can put Bilal Sahab's video up.
Assalamu alaikum, Murabbi Sahib. I just wanted to ask, what is the best way for us to gain Islamic knowledge to do tabligh? So I know you kind of touched upon about the app that you were talking about as well. But is there maybe a book that you would recommend, or is there an MTA show that you recommend for us to watch? What's the one thing that you'd ask us to do?
There is a lot of content available. It entirely depends, to be honest, on what language you're most comfortable with. If you can actually speak Urdu and you don't mind reading Urdu, then you're in a golden position, because the Ruhani Khuzain books, which of the Prophet Sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are obviously all in Urdu. Even though they are translated mostly in English, they're not all done yet. But that's obviously where a person should start. But of course, you need a guide to kind of understand what's being said about those books. How do you better understand it? For those who are Urdu speaking, the pocket book, which is a Tablighi pocket book, which was written by Khadim Sahib, you can actually access that on Al-Islam as well, is basically a very convenient guide in Urdu, answering most contemporary and Tahriri itirazat, allegations against Jamaat Ahmadiyya. So if you speak Urdu, that's absolutely perfect. Having said that, there is also an English rendering of that being published soon. And actually, coincidentally, that was my thesis in Jamia. We were able to translate that into English. So that should be coming out very soon as well. That is going to be very, very important for people who want to probably get a fundamental understanding of how to answer all of the core allegations of the Jamaat. That's one thing. If you are able to understand Arabic, probably not many people are out there, but the most amazing book, even if you can't understand Arabic, at least the references are in this book. It's called Al-Qawl al-Sari fi Zuhur al-Mahdi wal-Masih. I'll say that again. Al-Qawl al-Sari fi Zuhur al-Mahdi wal-Masih, which translates to the clear manifest statement about the appearance of the Messiah and the Mahdi. It's also available online. If you can check that on Al-Islam as well, written by an Ahmadi Muslim. Even though you might struggle to understand the Arabic of that, the quotes and references which have been mentioned for every single argument in there are complete. So that's a really incredible resource to go to as well. So that's something that I would say. And finally, of course, if you are more prone to watching videos, then I would like to say that there was a recent series, and actually there's a final episode happening this weekend as well, run by MTA, which is called Jawab Aap Bhi Dein. It's also an Urdu program where the panelists and the hosts are actually discussing a very, very important issues about Ahmadiyyat, about how we are being oppressed, particularly in Pakistan, the allegations that are raised from that angle, and how they are answering that is a very, very amazing way. There's a very special show this week as well. I can't really disclose what the show will contain, but I will say it will disclose something, or it will come to us in a way which we've never seen before. So I think you would really, really want to watch that program. Programs like this are extremely beneficial. The English format of that, of course, at the moment is Beacon of Truth. We've been having a new series of Beacon of Truth for the past month or so now. We've had about 5 episodes, mainly focusing on all of the allegations which are against Khilafat Ahmadiyya and Khilafat in general. They were very, very educational, very, very informative. They are also available on MTA Online 1.
Jazakallah. We've had a few more questions come through in the chat, Murabbi Sahib. One of them is, are there any specific attributes of the Holy Prophet ﷺ that are particularly stressed by the teachers at Jamia?
Oh, well, we studied it for 7 years. So I mean, I can't imagine any attribute that they failed to stress. But if I try and stretch my mind towards anything, I think the thing that we were most, and I think rightly so, that we were reminded about was the Holy Prophet Muhammad's devotion to prayer, and that we should always give time to prayer. Because whether you might understand it or not, Jamia is actually, it's also a very, 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 very extremely busy schedule. You are stretched throughout the day, various tasks. Obviously there's study, there's compulsory study times, there's other tasks such as khidmat al-khalq that you have to go and do, the tablighi activities, the tarbiyati activities, which various things that we do. And even in Jamia, it can, be as human faculty to become a little bit less slacked or lazy in your prayers. So there is complete reminder that it doesn't matter if you are, getting 100% marks in your hadith exam. It doesn't matter if you're getting 100% marks in your tafsir and your Quran. It doesn't mean anything if you're not praying on time, if you're not praying properly. So this is something that they would always remind us about. And I think that's absolutely golden. We should always remember that we are absolutely nothing. All of our knowledge is zero if we are not doing the fundamentals and we're not praying how we should be praying.
Jazakallah. I'm wary of the time. We're getting close to Maghrib time, so we've just got a few more questions, Murabbi Sahib, before we wrap up. One is from Hashir Sahib. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Hashir said that perhaps this is an irrelevant question, but often non-Ahmadi friends raise the allegation that our educations are haram, so particularly of Ahmadi students are haram when taking out student loans due to riba, and interest that there is on them. How should we respond to those Ghair Ahmadis when most of us don't have alternate options and we have to get student loans?
Well, that doesn't just apply to actually student finance. If you are to apply that situation, you actually have to apply this situation of interest onto many other things which, to be honest, people living in, especially in London, in the United Kingdom, have no other choice. For example, attaining a mortgage, attaining a house, even to an extent where people who are working, I'm not talking about just Ahmadis, I'm talking about anybody who even might just be a normal Muslim who is working out there to just earn a living, whether they are a taxi driver, they could be doing something, they're having to lease a car. There is finance involved in many things. Now, obviously, we know that we cannot ourselves spend out of that finance. And anything that's finance should be then dedicated either towards back to charity or towards the sake of Islam. So we shouldn't actually be using that. But like we know, just like with mortgage and like finance, where there is absolutely no other alternative, you will obviously be obliged or forced basically to use that thing. In fact, we can even see in the Holy Quran, and this is only for extreme situations, isn't it? Where if you cannot survive without a certain thing, whether that's things are forbidden, where you have even things like pork, you have alcohol, if those things are going to save you, if those things are going to be the difference between your life and your death, then that in that situation, of course, you can do that. That's one thing. But that's an extreme. Now where you have things like accommodation, you have education, where the interest is involved, to your extent, you should be paying that back. And that's actually fairly something which they don't understand. Because in Jamaat, there is something that exists which pretty much doesn't exist anywhere else, and that is the chanda system, the system of donation. So anything where we have something where we feel that that's interest, anything that we feel where that's sort of income that it's expendable for us, but we should or shouldn't be using it, that's the expendable income which you should be paying towards chanda. And that is partly why that's actually there. So, and that can be used for the sake of Islam, and that's actually justified. That any money that is like that, which comes in obviously from anywhere, you cannot use it on yourself, but you can use it for the sake of Islam, or you can use it for the sake of helping those who are in need. So that's basically that. And that's why the Jannah system in the Jamaat exists. But obviously, because they don't live in the Jamaati system, they don't understand how the Ahmadis, by the grace of Allah, are actually going above and beyond to actually pay these donations. You know, even if you go to countries like the Middle East or Asia, where they are literally giving chanda, you would hear it, His Holiness does khutbat of Tahriq Jadid, the Maqfiri, how they will put, you know, maybe at times their own food to the side, but they will still give chanda. That is the extent that they do it. And these systems are in place so that if there is somebody who, for instance, does have that expendable income, they should and definitely should have to donate that elsewhere, and it shouldn't be used for that. But like you said, there's no other alternative. So that's what people have to do in this country. Where you are in a country where you can find elsewhere, then of course that's absolutely amazing. And to be honest, you guys probably know better than me. They are also probably looking into scrapping these schemes anyway in the long run. So when that's abolished, then of course you won't even see anybody using that anyway.
Jazakallah. And if we can go to Ibrahim Mantos, who wants to ask a question via video call again.
Yep.
Assalamu alaikum, Murabbi Sahib. Thank you very much for your talk. Yeah, so my question is, are there any specific attributes of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that you feel that would be, in your opinion, would be most beneficial for today's society?
I think it's important that you say in my opinion, because it's really difficult to sort of like categorically say that this is the one. That's really, really important. I think if I was to think about it, for me, the most, personally speaking again, the most beautiful thing is forgiveness, his role of forgiveness. The way, like, it's just beyond me. Every time I think about the Holy Prophet Muhammad, it just becomes difficult to fathom how he was able to forgive all of that persecution, how he was able to overcome all of that pain, all of that hatred. It's really important because everywhere you see in society today, everybody wants to be politically correct. Yeah, everybody wants to be, okay, I'm gonna make this guy know that he's wrong. I'm gonna make this guy know that he's incorrect. And basically everybody's just fighting each other. And they have this basically a beef, yeah. So in this situation where everywhere you go, you're being fired at, you're being told that you're either a lesser person or that you're incorrect. How do you keep your calm? Or where people will manipulate you or take advantage of you, all of these things, where especially for students, it's a difficult thing to let that go, or let that pass. So when I remember the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and I see that he was able to forgive things which were much more severe, much more extreme than this, then yes, we can say that that's a huge inspiration, personally speaking, for me. That's probably what I would say. When you're young, you're quite passionate about things. You probably become angry quickly. Personally, for me, that is something which when I think about it, it's at the front. It's at the front of it.
Jazakallah.
Jazakallah. Murabbi Sahib, we have come to our last couple of questions, so we're wary of the time. We'll just ask these last questions. We've had a question come through on chat. My question is, what are Islam's teachings on anger in terms of how to deal with someone who's angry at you, as well as you feel angry towards someone else? So I feel maybe you answered this with just how you answered the last question, Murabbi Sahib. But basically, how do we deal with anger when both parties are feeling angry towards each other?
Before I go into the Islamic perspective of that, oftentimes you'll find that when someone's angry with one another, it's actually a lot to do with miscommunication. It's actually a lot to do with not not direct backstabbing. I wouldn't say it's direct. It's unintentional, to the point where, for example, once the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was in a place, a companion approached him and he said that, oh, Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, so-and-so has said such a thing about you. This is what he said. And obviously that thing was a negative thing. The Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam literally said to him that you are like that person where an archer has tried to fire an arrow at me. The arrow has missed. You picked up the arrow and you've gone and stabbed it in my heart. Therefore, we have to remember that when we are talking about things to other people, we, number one, shouldn't miscommunicate, but where we can try to avoid, gossiping about other people, even if it's true, where we can avoid gossiping about people, we should. Because that's where miscommunication, misunderstandings arise. And the only way to really resolve it, especially nowadays through social media, we have this problem, is to speak face to face. That's number one. You have to resolve these issues face to face. Don't rely on what he said or what they said. That's really, really important. The Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam also said, and this is actually a challenge and a duty upon us, that we shouldn't actually, a believer shouldn't be mad at another believer for more than 3 days. That's really important as well. So how do we actually go about achieving that? Number one, the Prophet ﷺ has said that, obviously you can be angry at somebody. Someone might have wronged you. There's something that you don't like about somebody. Someone's done something to you. You might be quite annoyed with them, but don't approach them just yet. Don't even say anything to them. Don't go to them and say, oh, you're wrong, or you should change your ways, or I don't like this about you. Don't do that. What you should do is you pray for them for 40 days. That person that you're afflicted by, the person that you're angry with or you're upset with, you pray for that person for 40 days. And what do you pray for that person? You pray that, God, my friend, this person that I know, he has this weakness. He has this shortcoming. And God, please remove that for him. And the Prophet ﷺ says that the situation is so that whether or not that person changes, he will probably, inshallah, change because you're praying for him. But even if he doesn't, the fact that you've been praying for that person for 40 days will immediately create a very soft position for him in your heart. And that's what we should try to achieve. So this is how the Prophet ﷺ has put it, that before we even confront one another, we should actually pray for that individual. And that's amazing. Because if everybody did that for everybody prayed for everybody, what kind of society would we be living in? Where someone really, really cares for you, someone who really wants you to improve. That's the kind of society that Prophet ﷺ tried to instill.
Jazakallah, Murabbi Sahib. And we've come to our last question. What books would you recommend to read to learn specifically about the life of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam?
I think there's a few, but my top ones, without any question of a doubt, if you want to begin and you just want to get a flavor and you want to really encapsulate, you don't want to really know the details, but you really want to just envision what it was like. And of course, without a doubt, it is the book Life of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It's actually more than a sort of historical context research paper. It's more like a storybook, and you really enjoy that book. And that will probably instill the passion inside you to want to know more. So once you've read that book, of course, available in English, you want to know more. The next book would, of course, be The Seal of Prophets, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, a voluminous book. It's actually a volume of three books, written by Hazrat Mirza Bashir Ahmad, must be pleased with him. And that is a book written from a very historic perspective. Not only does that speak about who the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was, what did he do, but it answers numerous allegations that have arisen through history from a historical basis, and it cites all of the references. It's not only available in Urdu, it's also available, of course, in English. Very, very beautifully done. That's a very important book. And then another book which you can also look towards is Hayat al-Tayyiba. It's in Urdu, but that's for Urdu speakers out there who want to know more about the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So these are probably in a nutshell enough for you to begin. Then you can, when you really feel like you want to excel, then Sirat Ibn Hisham, of course, is there. But that is probably something that you would want to, go to once you've read all of these first, so that when you go to that, you kind of have a bigger understanding of what you're talking about.